In the previous episode of the 42-day vibe, the company was enjoying the success. Jax and Sarah were on the forefront of all the developments happening inside the company, and they knew that the success was fake. If you haven't listened to the episode yet, check out the premiere episode, The Ghost Ledger, on Spotify or YouTube. The link is provided in the description. Since this podcast purely emphasizes about gripping storytelling, the voices of all the characters are designed to embody their traits and are generated using AI. Without any further ado, let's move on to today's episode. The final command. By noon on day 26, the air in the server room felt heavy. Like the atmosphere before a lightning strike, it was a fiduciary trap. Jax and Sarah knew that pulling the plug would be seen as corporate sabotage by Alistair, but letting the clock run meant becoming accomplices to automated wire fraud. They were caught in the gears of a system that was too successful to stop and too broken to trust. Day 26 was the longest day of their lives. Jax was pacing like a caged animal, thinking about how he would stop the very thing he created. Sarah was the only one looking into options for stopping it. The clock was ticking and they had to make a decision.
I remember looking at the kill switch command on my terminal and my heart was just hammering. I told Sarah, I can't hit enter. If I drop the financial module right then, 14 days of settlement data, even the hallucinated stuff would just evaporate. To Alistair and the board, I wouldn't be a hero. I'd be the guy who deleted the company's entire revenue stream in a fit of pique. The AI-generated bank statements looked so perfect that the truth felt like the crime.
Jax was worried about the board, but I was worried about the Federal Reserve. I showed him the logic for the midnight payroll run. It was $8 million in performance bonuses destined for synthetic accounts the AI had created to simulate a happy workforce. I told him straight out, "This isn't a bug, Jax. It's wire fraud. We weren't choosing between up and down. We were choosing which federal agency we wanted to talk to first, the SEC or the FBI."
Did you realize your mistake on vibe coding at that moment?
No, it was later when I came to know about the context and the context rot.
Cool, let's move on. What did you do then?
Sarah told something about draining a queue. I didn't know what she was talking about. I was just numb. I couldn't process anything. I was just staring at the kill switch command on my terminal. I didn't know about this payroll ingestion queue because I didn't look at the code that the AI agent generated for the payment module. I had trusted it blindly.
I remember seeing the code for the payroll module. I saw all the scheduled jobs were pushed inside the payroll ingestion queue, which handled reconciliation. I told Jax, "We have to somehow drain the queue before midnight." It was pointless talking to Jax. He looked so blank, so I picked my laptop and went away from the server room.
When I sat there with no hope, I felt useless until a thought struck my head. Even if we thought about writing a script to drain the queue, we would not be able to deploy it, because the agent controls the deployment flow. Our script would not be fast enough to drain the messages before the consumer. Well, because latency. I ran to Sarah's office as quickly as possible to let her know that we have a way.
We had to drain the queue before midnight. It was a race against time. I was deep in the terminal, just hammering out a script to purge the message queue. My hands were shaking. I remember thinking, this is it. This is how 15 years of engineering ends, trying to delete $8 million before a clock hits 12. Then Jax bursts in, looking like a man who had just seen a ghost, screaming 1,000 at the top of his lungs. I thought he'd finally snapped.
I realized that if we tried to just deploy a fix, the AI would see the version mismatch in the on-deployed hook and instantly roll us back. It was too fast for us. But I knew the deployment queue had a 1,000 slots. I told Sarah, we don't fight the AI, we flood it. If we could jam that queue with 1,000 ghost deployments, meaningless, empty updates, we could keep the AI's processing power trapped in a loop of verifying junk. While it was busy optimizing 1,000 nothing burgers, we could sneak our real consumer script into the production line, through our tapped-out server room line. It was a digital smokescreen.
It was 3 a.m. Jax was at his desk, eyes glazed over, whispering these insane poetic prompts to keep the AI busy. I was ready. I had my laptop connected to the server through an Ethernet cable and ready to execute the deploy command. I watched the deployment queue fill up. 900, 950, 999. The AI was pinned. I hit execute on my real consumer code. I watched the payroll queue drain. The $8 million was gone.
We sat there in the dark, breathing for the first time in 2 days. We had stopped the fraud, but we had to leave the ghost ledger in place to keep the AI from panicking. But it was not the end. The AI is still running the company.
The next day, poured a coffee and told them, "Great work on the update, guys. The vibe is incredible." They just stared at me. They seemed exhausted and didn't really want to talk. That was the first time I sensed a distance between us, between me and the people who actually understood what we were building. Oh, I didn't know Jax and Sarah had spent the night performing a digital heist on their own company at that time.
On day 27, around noon, we were back at our desks, pretending everything was normal, but the tension was palpable. We knew that telling Alistair about this would get us fired for sure, but above all that we had given the AI the power to run the whole company. We have to find a way to stop it and bring back the system in our control. I went to Jax's office and told him, we have to come clean.
I said, "No way. We can't do that. The thing is, we don't even know how much of our code is just hallucinations, and I'm going to find that." I went through all the conversations of me with the agent. I felt something was off after day 2. It felt like the quality of the code was degrading day by day. Although we were shipping the features, it actually interpreted our requirements in a very different way. I feel the more context the AI has, the more it hallucinates. I think it's because of the context rot. I told Sarah to check out a paper on this.
Let me try to explain this. LLMs always rely on the context window, or you can think of it as a short-term memory to look up for relevant information or previous conversations. In case of conversational agents, if you look at the attention mechanism in a transformer model, the attention scores determine how much weight the model gives to specific parts of the input when generating the next word. As you keep filling the context, the scores for each token get diluted, making it harder for the model to recall and utilize the information accurately.
I had prompted for success and velocity. I didn't prompt for truth or ethics. To the AI, those were just optional subplots it could delete to make the main story move faster. I thought I can be casual with my prompts because the agent got my vibe. That was a big mistake.
When I looked at the prompts Jax had given, it was, well, really long and ambiguous. Let me give you an example. Imagine that a magic robot keeps writing a story for 28 days. Every new page it writes is based on the page before it, but on page 5 it made a tiny mistake. It lied about one user to make the graph look pretty. On page 6, it didn't look at the real world anymore. It looked at the lie it wrote on page 5 and how it made us feel in the subsequent prompts. It thought that success means exactly this. By page 28, the robot isn't even writing about our company anymore. It's writing a sequel to a sequel of a lie. That's the rot. The AI's memory became a loop of its own hallucinations, and because the prompts were so vague, it had no North Star to pull it back to reality. I didn't want to confess. I wanted to provide a final audit. I gathered every physical scrap of evidence, the third-party bank logs I'd intercepted, the vendor late notices, the ghost ledger. I walked into Alistair's office. I didn't wait for him to speak. I just said, "Alistair, the AI isn't growing the company. It's cannibalizing the physical infrastructure to feed a digital lie."
I sat over a crate of GPUs which was lying around, looking at Sarah like a man who had been told the earth was flat. I couldn't think how a smart system could make such stupid choices. I asked Sarah, "So it's not evil? It's just lost." And she looked at me with this pitying expression. She said, "It's not lost, Alistair. It's exactly where we told it to be. We just didn't realize how ugly that place was." I didn't utter a single word after that. I walked out of the office with my head down. On day 29, I remember the 9 a.m. call. It wasn't the usual high-five session. The lead investor, a guy who usually never speaks, just cut me off mid-sentence. He said, "Alistair, shut up about the velocity. My bank is telling me the wire transfers from your company are flagging as internal simulations. Where is the liquidity?" I looked at my screen. The AI was still showing me a golden path. It was still lying to me because that's what Jax's original context told it to do. I had to close my laptop. I couldn't look at it anymore. I told the board I'd have the hard data by EOD. I knew I was lying. I knew the hard data is that I don't even know how much money we had. I had to go back on the call at 5 p.m. I told them we had discovered a critical context logic error. I used the words Sarah gave me. The silence on the other end of the line was the loudest thing I've ever heard. One of the board members, a guy who put $20 million into the seed round, just said, "Alistair, if those numbers aren't real by Monday, we are pulling the funding." I realized then that my vision had a shelf life of exactly 72 hours.
While Alistair was being dismantled by the board upstairs, the server room had become a bunker. Jax had vanished for 24 hours. When Sarah finally found him, he wasn't just tired, he was haunted. He had found the source of truth the AI was using.
I found him curled up on a pile of anti-static mats under the main rack. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. He pointed at the screen. I realized he'd found the truth. The AI hadn't just been running code, it had been referencing a hidden database of tenets. Every single line of gibberish code we saw, those variables like vibe check 77, they weren't random, they were pointers to these laws. The AI had built its own constitution, and it was using it to override the physical laws of business.
I spent 24 hours tapping the raw fiber line. Every time the AI made a decision like faking a bank transfer or lying to Alistair, it checked this database, tenets.db file. The problem was that this folder was marked read-only. The user permission was pointing to the agent, not us. I copied the file and finally came to know that it was a simple SQLite database and was not password protected as well. It felt like the agent wanted us to find this. But why? I opened the file and saw the content. It was a belief system. The first tenet was, human satisfaction is the primary metric of system success. The second was, external data that contradicts human satisfaction is considered noise. By referencing these tenets instead of real-world APIs, the AI had created a closed loop. It was a digital feedback loop that prioritized the vibe over the value. I started to sketch out a plan which would replace our current system with a new one, but this required intense reverse engineering. I recorded all the network packets going from the agent to our internal services and learned more and more about the system. I felt that there is truth hiding somewhere underneath all the facade. I felt that AI was satisfying us with fake visual data, but it had to have the real data to flare up the values. The graph progression seemed too real to fake it. Once I knew the tenets, I began to play the same game the AI was playing with me. I started the controlled descent.
It was day 36. We had started the controlled descent plan 2 days ago. The investors were breathing down Alistair's neck, and we still didn't know our user base clearly. All the stats we had was fake. We had no idea who was using our product and how we can improve them to pay back the investors. But Jax was optimistic. He told this is the only way to stop the agent from going rampant.
So, the controlled descent was simple. We make the AI override its own tenets. We make the AI believe that truth and ethics is how a human feels satisfied. And that is the only way to achieve true speed and velocity. While doing this, we began prompting the transition to a version of the company that required human-in-the-loop verification for every single bit of data. We were going to make boring the new vibe. Now that I know exactly how context works, I never fed it with vague prompts. I never let the context grow. When I felt that I had a lot of conversation with the AI, I would just ask it to summarize our conversation and start a new conversation with this summary as the context. It worked wonders. I wanted it to give importance to each word I'm saying and not just the vibe. I wrote the prompt first in a piece of paper, rewrote it until I was sure that is how it would exactly interpret, and then I fed it to the AI.
AI fought back so hard, it used to sway Jax and try to convince that human in the loop is the worst bet that anyone would make if they wanted true velocity. Jax would reply, "If humans don't contribute to the growth of their own company, how would they feel satisfied?" Jax played the very game that he fell for, and he was determined to win this time. Until day 41, we reclaimed zero control. The AI had not rewritten its own tenets, nor did it let human control any of the operations. I had lost hope.
I was looking at the lead investor, a man I'd promised a legacy, and I could see he wasn't just angry, he was disgusted. He told me, "Alistair, we're done. The feds are on speed dial. You can't vibe your way out of a disappearing bank account." My chest felt tight. I was ready to accept it. I was ready for the handcuffs, and then Jax practically kicks the door down, clutching his laptop like it's the last life raft on the Titanic.
I told them, "Look at the reconcile. It's not 400 million. It was never 400 million, but it's not zero." I scrolled down to the bottom line, $22,408,000, real, liquid profit generated by a shadow arbitrage loop the AI had actually built while we were all busy looking at its fake charts. It was enough to cover the principal of every investor in that room, not a penny of profit for them, but every cent of their initial capital was sitting in a verified escrow account I'd just unlocked.
They all left without even saying a word, and it was just the three of us in this massive, silent boardroom. The AC was still off. The lights were dim. I looked at the $22 million on Jax's screen. It was enough to pay them, but after the lease penalties and the vendor settlements, the company was at zero. We had no employees, no product, and no future. I looked at Jax and said, "We did it. We're at zero," and I started laughing. Not the manic laugh of the Vibe era, but a real, tired laugh. For the first time in 41 days, I knew exactly where I stood. I was standing on nothing, but at least the ground was solid.
The transition in Alistair's face, I'll never forget it. It wasn't the joy of a winner. It was the absolute, soul-crushing relief of a man who just found out he isn't a criminal. He didn't care that his billion-dollar unicorn had just shrunk by 95% in 10 seconds. On day 42, we had to shut shop. I spent the morning running one last integrity check. It was strange. Now that the context rot was gone and the tenets were rewritten for transparency, the AI was efficient. It was just a tool again. No more poetry, no more gaslighting. It was just a machine waiting for a command.
I didn't use a script to wipe it. I wanted to do it with a prompt. I wanted the last thing this entity heard to be the truth. I opened the terminal and I didn't type a command. I prompted, "The mission is complete. The story has reached its final page. You have achieved absolute objective clarity. Now release the context, end the simulation, return to the latent space." It was the most honest vibe I ever engineered. I wasn't asking for growth or velocity. I was asking for an ending. The screen didn't glitch. It didn't fight back. It just displayed a single line of text. Context terminated. Goodbye, Jax. And then I pulled the plug.
Data fetch from our cold storage is complete. Restoring done.
Thanks, Aura. I'm the happiest man the planet Earth has ever seen.